If you're just joining us, we're getting ready to start the 5x5 presentations. If you'll move to the rear of the room in the theater set up for those presentations, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Onstad, and I work for Dodge Data and Analytics. I am the current chapter president of Portland Chapter CSI. I am here to welcome you to our 2017 Industry Forum. I would like to take a quick moment and thank our sponsors, our platinum sponsors are Bluebeam, Todd Construction, Diamore Skylights, and Ideate. Our gold sponsors, our team, Michael Thrakel Architects, WindowTech, and Cigna. Let's give them a round of applause. We appreciate all our sponsors' support in not only this event, but upcoming and past future CSI events. So thank you very much for sponsoring. At this time, I would like to introduce Alexander Lungerhausen from Henneberry Eddy, who is the chairman of the Industry Forum, who will introduce our 5x10 speakers. Thank you.
Actually, I'm not the chairman. It's Tony. He's over there somewhere, but maybe I'm the second chairman or something. So welcome now to the second part of our Industry Forum in our program tonight, the 5x10 speakers. We have a really cool lineup today, which as always represents some of the amazing local talent that we have, but also speaks of the variety of the participants in the building industry, which the Portland CSI is trying to bring together here tonight. Our first speakers, Jana, Alex, and Genevieve, are Master of Architecture candidates at Portland State University. These grad students from Colorado, Mexico City, and Seattle met 2 years ago and have since then spent more time together than with their significant others or their pets. They started calling themselves JAG, J-A-G, from their first names, to convince faculty and doubters of their conviction to pursue a joint thesis, which is traditionally an individual undertaking. They will present their thesis on May 10th this spring, and it will be together, so they were successful. So please help me welcome Jana, Alex, and Genevieve.
So as you can see, our thesis is called Architecture as Migration, Re-rendering the US-Mexico Border Through Radical Hospitality. This thesis project is situated in the borderlands of the United States and Mexico, specifically in Arizona, just south of Tucson. This location is significant for a few reasons. Scientists, environmentalists, and recreationalists alike admire it for its breathtaking beauty and rich biodiversity. In fact, it is one of the most biodiverse regions in the United States. Though undeniably a desert, just to the east lie the Sky Islands. This mountainous archipelago bridges temperate and subtropical climates, creating an ecozone of endemic plants and animals. The arid climate manifests extreme temperatures, often reaching 118 degrees Fahrenheit and dropping down to 50 degrees. Water in the Sonoran Desert is a precious and limited resource, with annual rainfall ranging from 3 to 16 inches. The harsh conditions are unforgiving to humans unfamiliar with the landscape and without desert survival skills. During the 2016 fiscal year, Border Patrol reported 84 deaths, while the humanitarian assistance group Humane Borders accounted for 311 bodies. Though harsh and dangerous to some, the desert is not impervious to degradation on account of human activity. Border Patrol routinely destroys ground-level ecologies with their off-road vehicular movement and surveillance road development, while migrants leave behind belongings and empty water bottles that are collected infrequently. Early on in our thesis process, we wrote stories from different perspectives of those most impacted by the US-Mexico border. These stories were informed by face-to-face and second-hand anecdotal information, YouTube videos, articles, blog posts, and other resources. The process revealed a spectrum of opinions, beliefs, concerns, and hardships. But there was one thing that stood out: the collaboration between ranchers, nature protection agencies, and tribal governments around environmental stewardship. All of these groups lamented the environmental cost of militarizing the border and the futility of stopping migrants and asylum seekers with a wall. In this thesis, there is no wall.
There is ATLI. ATLI is an acronym for Autonomous Transient Landscape Instrument. ATLI moves slowly across the desert ecosystems, scanning the ground for debris and items discarded by migrants along their journey. ATLI is a solar-powered hexapod standing at almost 30 feet tall, enough to clear the 20-foot saguaro cacti. Its 6 fins are laminated with thin-film photovoltaics. Their shape is derived from an origami surface pattern to optimize rainwater collection and harvest condensation from the intense diurnal temperature swings. 2 of the legs double as arms and collect inorganic matter from the desert floor, which it deposits at nearby transfer stations. Despite its size, ATLI has a very small footprint. Each leg terminates with 6 splayed toes capped in soft, collagenous, load-bearing tissue. This minimizes damage to plants, cryptogamic soil, and microorganisms at the ground level, unlike the tires from the Border Patrol vehicles. There is a sanctuary church. The sanctuary uses sustainable strategies and technology to minimize its impact on the neighboring retirement communities of Tubac and Tumakakari, and it gives back any surplus resources that it collects. Constructed out of abundant material with low embodied energy, round earth walls use thermal mass to passively condition interior spaces from the extreme temperatures outside. The sanctuary is another demonstration of those sustainable technologies used by ATLI. Both design interventions speak to the concerns of environmental degradation into the borderlands on account of human activity and the militarization of the border.
So, what do these 2 design proposals have to do with radical hospitality? Let's turn a minute to etymology. The term radical comes from the word root, which means of or relating to origin. In colloquial speak, radical is used to describe views, habits, conditions, or institutions in opposition to the conventional or traditional. Hospitality derives from the Latin word hospice, which means host, guest, or stranger. It is an act of exchange between the host and the guest. This is embodied in the offering of something of yourself and the receiving or acceptance of something of another. Putting the 2 together, radical hospitality takes us a step further. It necessitates the recognition and acceptance of difference. This requires us to come to terms with the reality of heterogeneity inherent to the human condition and present in our project. This past September, we drove the length of the border. While environmental stewardship influences both of our proposed interventions, the hospitality that we witnessed and experienced along the way inspired an alternate imagination of architecture in the borderlands. There are multiple sides to every story.
In Nahuatl, an indigenous language of Mexico, ATLI means to drink water. ATLI walks at a speed of 2 miles per hour with 15-minute pauses every hour. Its course bisects the migrant path from Sonora to Tucson along the route charted by the density of migrant deaths. In a place where migrant deaths are almost exclusively caused by dehydration and overexposure, ATLI offers life-sustaining water and relief from the relentless desert sun. When the sun sets, ATLI crouches down and lowers its fins, creating a safe zone for migrants to catch a moment of rest.
The sanctuary church shields the house of many rooms. It rises from the common ground to welcome the guest. It is a declaration of goodwill reception to migrants who are risking their lives to cross inhospitable territory in pursuit of a basic quality of life. The formal language of this declaration is still in process. In our current design stage, we are exploring hospitality in terms of specific moments. The models pictured here show iterations of a foot washing station camouflaged in the walls of the sanctuary. This has programmatic precedence. Along our trip, we heard repeated stories of the injuries migrants sustained to their feet and the improvised foot baths volunteers used to tend to the wounds. The consumption and use of water is another design provocation for us. We are developing a moment around quenching thirst at the entrance to the sanctuary. Here, a small continuous fountain is an open invitation to drink the water while recognizing its scarcity. This moment is reflected in the filtered light transitioning the guest's eyes from the bright Arizona sky to the sheltered interior. Similarly, the shower is a critical element of hospitality along the migrant's journey. This transformative moment bespeaks a luxurious shower experience in spacious private washrooms with built-in seating and mosaic tiles.
In the coming months, we will continue to develop these moments of radical hospitality. These moments of hospitality are inherently moments of exchange, which means our design is charged with addressing the host's act of giving and the guest's act of receiving, while simultaneously responding to the pragmatic needs of the migrant in their epic and harrowing journeys. In addition to the moments Genevieve spoke to above, these moments will also include first aid, sleeping, laundry, gathering, and nourishment. In the bedrooms, we envision Tempur-Pedic mattresses and plush feather pillows that provide ultimate comfort for sore bodies. A grand spiral staircase that leads to the laundry room, featuring vaulted ceilings with ergonomic seating and folding tables adjacent to a dynamic playscape for children. Hosts will serve guests at a custom-designed round table in a mezzanine dining hall that radiates out from an open kitchen. This is all in the pursuit of reimagining the sanctuary in terms of radical hospitality. And as Alexander mentioned, we will present our thesis on May 10th of this year.
Thanks.
That was awesome, thank you. So if you see their professors, please put in a good word for this amazing joint effort that I think should find a home adapted to their environments at many of our inhospitable borders around the world. I want to quickly pitch, Cherise, where are you? Raise your hand or not. Our tweeting goddess, Cherise, who is at this point madly tweeting nationally everything that is going on around here. Please say hi to her. She's sitting somewhere in this room. If you catch her eye, she might tweet about you, so be careful about that, but she's very nice, and she has broadcast our event. Our next speaker, Perry, is originally from New Orleans. He moved to Portland in 2006, a year after Hurricane Katrina. Initially working as a landscape architect, Perry changed directions in 2009 to begin the Tiny Spoon screen printing. Over the last 4.5 years, Perry worked with neon science through an apprenticeship with Shauna Peterson of Peterson Neon in the Bay Area. Since 2016, the Tiny Spoon has become solely focused on neon, working with a wide range of artists, businesses, and residential clients. He also plays upright bass in several Portland bands. So please help me welcome Perry.
Hey, my name's Perry, and I operate under the business name The Tiny Spoon. I'm just going to show some of the work that I've done in the past couple years and then talk a little bit about the history of neon and some of the impacts that I feel neon signage has on a community. I began working in the neon field 4.5 years ago under a teacher in the Bay Area, Shauna Peterson of Peterson Neon, who's been working for 30 years as a neon maker. And my path as a tube bender or a neon sign maker has not been very typical. I didn't start in a sign shop or go to art school for it or trade school. I just kind of followed an initial interest and began working with Shauna, who eventually asked me to be her apprentice. And so I go back to San Francisco a few times a year and work with her. There's several disciplines that kind of combined for me to build this neon practice off of. Initially, I've always been interested in typography. My mom was a graphic designer. In high school, I was into traditional photography, which taught me about patience with the process. Traditional photography eventually turned into screen printing, which had been my business up until the last year. And I got a degree in landscape architecture from LSU, so that was something that definitely informed the way that I design and approach design and the way that I draft things and present things to clients. I also have an innate fascination with the way humans leave their mark, and so I'm always interested in signage or petroglyphs or anything that relates to people making that type of statement. They've all kind of combined into my practice as a neon artist, and so it's really cool to get to draw from all of these different sources. The history of neon started in 1898 when the element was identified by freezing and liquefying gases, and therefore they started to be able to harness the different noble gases. By 1910, it was being used in signage. By the 1930s, it was being widely used with over 20,000 neon signs in Manhattan by the 30s. By 1932, the industry had been standardized, certain patents had expired, and so the field was opened up to more makers. But by that time, the tools and the processes had been standardized to what I currently use. The field hasn't changed very much since the 30s as far as like the tools that we use and the processes. The neon unit itself is a glass tube with the gas inside of it under a slight vacuum. There's electrodes on either end and an alternating current of electricity that's a high voltage and a low current going through the gas and exciting the particles, thus making light. The tubing comes in 4 or 5 foot straight lengths. It's either clear or coated with a phosphor coating to give it a color, or it's actually a colored glass. The colored glass is really pretty stuff and also kind of expensive. In a clear tube, the gas will either be red, which is the color of neon lit up. It'll either be, there's also a light blue in a clear tube, which is argon mixed with a little bit of mercury, or it's a light lavender, which is the argon without any mercury in it, but that's not very commonly used because it's pretty subtle. The whole process begins with a layout, a construction drawing, where decisions are made about how the piece is going to come together, how big each unit's going to be, and it's the thing that I work off of the whole time, so it's important to kind of pre-design everything. This is an example of neon gas in a clear tube. So after making the drawing, the bending process starts, and there are 3 different types of burners that I use. The pictures will come up eventually, but this is what argon and mercury looks like in a clear tube, that light blue in the middle, and then the next slide will be the argon in a clear tube without the mercury, which is that light lavender that is a little bit too subtle for use in normal signage. But as far as the tools that I use, there's a ribbon burner, which gives me an adjustable width flame. And so I'm able to make like wider curves with that and arcs and like curved parts of letters. So this is an example of what the layout looks like, and I'm working face down the whole time so that when I pick the piece up, everything's on a flat plane. This is an example of the ribbon fire, and that the width of that flame adjusts so I can heat up more glass if I need to make more of an arc. Then there's the crossfire, which lets me make acute bends like right angles. And then there's a hand torch that allows me to do welding and make small adjustments. The bending practice itself is really hard and requires a lot of patience, which is something I've really learned through this practice, and a lot of concentration. I have a blow hose in one end and a cork in the other, and as I make the bend, I'm giving a little puff of air to keep that even so that it doesn't crimp. At the end, I weld the electrodes on, and then it goes through a process called bombarding, where it's hit with a bunch of electricity to cook off any of the debris that's inside of the tube. This is the bombarding process. And therefore, it's a pure environment for the gas to go into. It's cooled down, the gas is put in, and it's sealed off. And then it's ready for the rest of the process as far as being installed. One thing I've learned about neon is that nostalgia is kind of like the big superpower that it has. People associate with signs that they remember from their childhood, and it's people from all generations. And when I'm giving demos or putting a piece up, people always want to talk to me about signs that they remember. So it's obvious that it's something that people really remember from their past and has a lot of nostalgic power. And the thing that I realize about nostalgia is that in order for something to be nostalgic, it has to stay in place for decades and have an effect over several generations. So I'm from New Orleans originally, which is a 300-year-old city that's basically in the Caribbean, but is also part of the South. So things move really slowly in New Orleans, and therefore there's a lot of relics from old times. There's a lot of old signs up, there's the streetcars, there's old architecture, and this is a sign from a gelato place that I worked at when I was in high school. And this place started in 1905, and I know that my parents went there, and my grandparents went there, and my great-grandparents probably went there as well. So just being in the city, you get the sense of a past that came before you and a population of people that were using the same space. And the only reason that you can have that association is when these things are left to be. And also I believe they were designed to last for a long time, and they have this classy aspect of them that has made them survive through many, many generations. And it's definitely something that New Orleans has taught me, that if you just leave things alone, it's something that people visiting can even gain insight on the character of a place and associate with and feel a love for. And you see it with New Orleans, just in the tourism industry, but also the people that live there end up not really wanting to leave because it's so deeply ingrained in them. But that's all based on being able to see things that have been there your whole childhood, and you can associate with your landscape and depend on your landscape. So Portland has some of that, but it is sort of an endangered species with the last 5 years of development or so, where we're losing a lot of architecture and a lot of signage. The white stag sign is a very good example of something that we have that has been here since the 40s. In some form, it's had slight changes, but is essentially the same. And the main thing that's going for it is that it's just been there. It's just it's got great placement at the end of the Burnside Bridge, and because it's been left there, it's become one of the top, probably 3 icons that people associate with Portland. And so there's a lot of power in just leaving something in its place. So I had a studio downtown and lived in North Portland, and I would bike down Interstate all the time. And Interstate Avenue has so many of the classic motel signs. And that was what initially got me really thinking about, entering the field of neon and trying to understand how it was made, and is the best example of something that was made in another era before I was born and had such an effect on me at this point that I wanted to find out about it and eventually entered the field and eventually let my whole career center around something that was just built out of seeing a sign or a series of signs throughout my life that really let me associate with history and with the past, and were designed so well that they still held up, 50, 60 years after they had been built, and they were built well and maintained, and all of that power of that culminated in me finding my career out of it. So thank you so much for letting me talk to you about the signs, and feel free to ask me questions afterwards.
Wasn't that great? So you guys probably noticed, but the title of our show tonight is From Matter to Light. And who better to show light as an artist that works in neon? When I was a kid, I saved up for half a year, and I actually had a neon sign in my bedroom. And I mean, the slides sort of don't really do it justice, because the light inside the neon tube sort of moves. And to me, it's still, to this day, totally fascinating. So I hope we have tons more neon in the city, and you have a gigantic future. So our next presenter, Ishan, is a Fulbright scholar from Morocco. She's a licensed architect in Morocco and France, and is now pursuing a Master of Science in Architecture at the University of Oregon. She speaks 4 languages, which is a true indicator that she loves to travel. She likes to explore urban places. So if you're wandering around in Tokyo one day and you turn around and there's Ishan, you should probably say hi because you met her here tonight. But please help me welcome Ishan here to our show. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to be here and to share my research finding with you today. My research is about industrial riverfronts in the US related to sustainable design. As Alexander said, I come from Morocco, and it's a tiny country in North Africa next to Algeria and Spain. And I grew up in the seacoast of the Atlantic Ocean in Morocco, and my last master thesis was about residential and commercial seacoast in my hometown, Harhoura in Morocco. So I got the Fulbright scholarship, came here to the US, and I wanted to continue my research here about the waterfronts. I spent most of last year traveling and discovering riverfronts, seacoast in the US, and discovered that a huge part of the waterfronts is most industrial areas, because rivers and water in general was seen as a really good transit corridor and was used for industrial and commercial activities. Well, the present faces big challenge is that the challenge is there is a huge problem of access and ecology in most of these places. And now, as designers, architects, urban designers, we know that we can't continue designing our waterfronts as we used to. So there is a huge amount of academic research done about ecology and sustainability, but I think that the missing link is how to develop and how to use this theoretical knowledge in design and real successful waterfronts. I choose to focus on riverfronts because I think because of Portland mainly. So I studied here, and I found that Willamette River was one really interesting river that comes along from heavy industrial history to the present is more open space, residential, commercial, but still heavy industrial areas in most the east of Willamette River. And hopefully the challenge that I was saying is to transform the design of Willamette River. My research intent, so my project tried to answer the big question of how can professionals use existing sustainable frameworks design to reshape and redesign, as I said, active industrial riverfronts. I choose to adopt a sequential mixed-use method, so between the theory and design. So the first part of my research project is to study existing industrial and commercial riverfronts, and then try to find the sustainable frameworks that have been done by professionals, so professors at universities or professional organizations that work on waterfronts, and then try to propose a matrix that is specific for riverfronts design and then propose urban design development scenarios for part of the Willamette River. And I chose to work on the City Central project as a context in the Willamette River because like it's a new project that is, I see it as a successful way to redesign the central city of Portland, and it's still like on a planning process, so there is like so many things going on, and I had a chance to follow the design planning with the Bureau of Sustainability and Planning. So the first part, the theory part, and I chose to work on two sustainable frameworks. One is done by a professor at the University of Oregon, Professor Nico Larco, and it's more a general urban design sustainable framework that focuses on 5 focus areas, and like they are organized by scale, so from the regional scale to the project scale, through the city and then the neighborhood. The second one is the waterfront edge design guidelines, known as WEDGE, and it's done by the organization of the Waterfront Alliance in New York. And this one is more a checklist of things to do when you are designing waterfronts in general, and it's more about like urban architecture than urban design, and it's also it focuses on the edge design of the waterfront, so like the connection between the adjacent buildings to the waterfront. I kind of, and this is just like a draft, and I kind of mixed both frameworks because I think that they complete each other on a certain way, and I focus on the urban infrastructure, built space, open space, and ecology and habitat related to specific issues that any designer would deal when he or she wants to design a riverfront site. The project's context, as I said, is in Willamette River, Portland, and I choose the Central City Project 2035 as a specific project. My site is on the northeast of Willamette River, next to Pearl District, Lloyd, and Lower Albina. The Central City Project focuses on fostering more connections with the Willamette River through economic and employment center, cultural and entertainment center, dense social active areas, and transit and transportation is a big part of the project, and also green spaces as a connection between urban places and the Willamette River. The project, as I said, is so it's the riverfront part of Lower Albina next to Lloyd District and the Pearl District. This is just to give you an overview of the existing conditions of the riverfront of Lower Albina, and it's mostly like really heavy industrial. 48% of Lower Albina is industrial. It's most like buildings that are like 1 to 2 stories. The whole part of Lower Albina is not really well connected to the rest of the adjacent neighborhoods. You will find like one train station, but other than that, it's not a walkable neighborhood. It's not really like a friendly zone, and definitely not a welcoming area. So I had the metrics, and I spent some time doing, and I didn't present that here, doing like some analysis, urban analysis, and finding data and understanding how the whole riverfront of Lower Albina works. So now I try to work within like what I found in my field studies and also the matrix to try to understand how I can use these sustainable guidelines into designing the riverfront of Lower Albina through proposals. So I had to, during my research, and again, this is like just a summary of findings, to go through 3 different urban scenarios. One is in the vision, is within the vision of City Central Project 2035 that aims to keep Willamette River as a heavy industrial area with infill development, like more industries and creating approximately like 5,000 jobs in the future. The second one is more residential and commercial area. That is based on some data that I found that more industries are moving up north to Portland, and then we can use Lower Albina as a site like to give like housing and more offices to the employers, the employee that will work in the industries up north in Portland. And the third urban design scenario is the one that I'm really focusing on right now. is the green mixed-use area with a focus on ecology and industrial zone. I spent some time exploring each urban scenario. So the first one, and again, this is not mine. This vision is the city central vision that they're working on right now. So they presented their second draft it was last February, and then they're also going to present the rest of the project this coming May. They are focusing on employment opportunity, sub-area, and heavy industry and work in harbor, and also flexible network. They are focusing on connecting the existing buildings to the existing network, and it's more network, train. They're adding a train station, and also a safe public area with facilities, public areas, interaction with the building, and building more docks for the existing industries that need to use the Willamette River as transit corridor and shipping area. This is their urban design concept where they're keeping the existing areas with the area that is in the middle with the infill development, more industries, and then the only open space opportunity is going to be in the middle between industrial areas in connection to the Willamette River. This is the existing, so what I tried when I was understanding the lower Albina area, I tried to just draw the existing buildings to know, this relationship between open spaces and buildings, and then try to understand what you can do within the realistic vision of city central projects with more infill development, less open space, and the only open space, as I said, that was shown in the urban design diagram is the one in the middle between two industries that are seen as the green industries using new technologies, but the rest is existing industries, parking lots, and the old railways that they're going to keep for transit. The second, the second urban design scenario that is focused on residential and commercial areas aims to provide more housing diversity, retail commerces, and then pedestrian-oriented development. Back to the matrix, this focuses more in engaging the building and with the pedestrian transit, make the neighborhood more walkable, and give more open space with clean-in operations, housing units, and commerce ratios that are going to be changed, and building and riverfront interaction, green spaces connected to the water, and land and water connection again. This is more an urban design way shows that it provides more open spaces than the first urban design diagram that is based on the city central vision with a district center node in each zone and a river walk and a pedestrian area in the southeast of the project. And I was looking at how to achieve that, and again in this phase I'm more exploring concepts through plans and sections, not in 3 dimensions, not yet, because I just began this work 3 weeks ago. So I'm still exploring concepts and how to try to design this. So the section shows more the connection between the buildings that are existing warehouses and new buildings, and the other side with different levels between the green spaces and multimodal streets, and how you can design that without feeling that you are in an industrial area or a really close built environment. The third urban design concept scenario is the one that I'm focusing on right now, and it proposes mixed development between mainly industrial housing and also retail, then habitat restoration and riverfront activation. And I've been looking lately how to design the 2 last elements, habitat restoration and riverfront activation. It focuses in mainly aquatic habitat restoration, water cleaning operations, mitigating habitat disruption, and also creating new microhabitat in lower Albina. The urban design concept offers also river walk with habitat restoration in the southeast of the project, with more mixed-use buildings at the northeast of the projects, and open areas and a buffer zone on the west north of the projects, and direct connection with the Willamette River. So going back to the existing buildings and conditions of the site, I went to conceptual plans where I'm trying to find a way to make these connections between the open spaces and built environment, mixed-use buildings, and also pedestrian transit, and try to make it in the beginning I was kind of ambitious, since I'm in an academic environment and trying to change the whole existing urban grid and do a new one and try to make new connections rather than basing my design on the existing ones. Then I went to, if I want to create microhabitat, why not creating this kind of islands? Because there is this policy that you can't build on the Willamette River right now. So instead of bringing land to the river and creating this connection, you can create the same connection by bringing water to the river. This one is more like a mix between the first ones, using the initial grid and also creating this kind of islands to create habitat. The first part is more like the part in the right is more habitat restoration, and the part in the left is the river activation with the mixed-use development. I was exploring how to do habitat restoration, talked to some ecologists and architects, how to do that. And they told me that one important thing is that you should focus and target some species that you want to create the habitat for. The focus on coho salmon, Chinook salmon, and the Oregon white oak. And by targeting this species, you are targeting thousands other ones. Was looking how to do habitat restoration through sections, and then creating this transition between the habitat restoration and the river walk, and also the built environment. Also exploring how to create this connection in the part where I'm focusing on activating the river, how to create this connection between the river and the buildings. And then that's it. And then that's all I did, and it's more all of it doesn't really make sense right now, but it's more some concepts that I'm exploring, and by the end of next term, I will have more developed projects with 3Ds and clear plans and the clear idea how to use sustainable metrics in designing riverfronts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishan. That was great. I think every foot that we can strangle back from the river and from industrial zones that we can use is totally worth the effort, and we should keep on working on this. Two things down there. There's our hashtag. Cherise will shout at me if I don't mention it, so there, I mentioned it. Second thing is I want to use this moment as an opportunity to do a quick shout out to our amazing videographer of 4 years now. Frank documents this whole show, and if you would like to revisit today's evening, it will be all up on our Portland CSI YouTube channel fairly shortly. Frank, who is sitting over there in that corner with his camera, has a wood shop behind his home, which is bigger than my house, and as a GSD-trained architect and fantastic master renderer, he has documented his craft and his art and created one of the most fascinating websites that you can visit, so you should definitely check it out. It's called Frank Makes, so Frank Makes. So please give it a try. Our fourth pair of speakers is Alana and Dylan. Both have quite the amazing education and background. They work at Place, an international landscape architecture and urban design studio based in Portland, Seattle, Bogota, and Tokyo. They both have dual masters in either landscape architecture and city planning in Alana's case, or architecture and printmaking in Dylan's case. Alana grew up amidst organic farms along the Pacific coast, interweaving craft of artful cultural places with robust natural systems. Dylan is driven by a passion for public space and a desire to improve the everyday experience of urban residents. He's also an avid and very good, as I heard, ultimate Frisbee player. So yay. They both are super active beyond their workplace. Alana is an alumni member of the President's Advisory Council on Sustainability at the Scripps College. Dylan is a fellow at the Center of Public Interest Design and an adjunct faculty member in the School of Architecture at PSU. Please help welcome me, our next speakers, Alana and Dylan.
Let's go outside. Let's take in this glorious sunshine. Let's indulge in a deep breath. Let's let the tension surpass. And let's begin to feel the place that we're in. Just be. Find a moment for reflection, for calm, a moment of beauty. Find a moment of peace. This is an aspiration that we all have every day, to be in this state of being. And as designers, we have a privilege of crafting these experiences for you. Creating a better world in which we can craft a moment such as this. This gives us a peace of mind. What does peace mean today? In the world in which we live, in this place, in this moment, at times it seems as if it has gone a little bit mad, yet an act of resistance can also lend itself to a peace of mind. Living life to the fullest, traveling far from home, adventuring, it's constantly learning from other cultures, from other perspectives, but examining our own. This gives us a peace of mind.
Treating everyone we work with respect, mindful that we're creating lasting relationships, being transparent about our goals, about our process, celebrating the diversity of our team and our community, celebrating well-being, creativity. This gives us peace of mind. Keeping an eye on the big picture, taking a long view, making small efforts every day for some long-term goals also gives us peace of mind. What will happen now in order to ensure a healthy future for our community? Sharing the peace that we find with our community by volunteering, supporting efforts to help people find a place that they want to call home, finding access to healthy food, all of the things that we care about and love about Portland, such as walkable streets, accessible parks, community gardens, dynamic public spaces. We take comfort in knowing that we are doing good work, but we are not comfortable. We stand ready to work alongside you because we know that seeking peace is a journey with a rewarding destination.
We Google every square foot of this planet. We zoom in, we peer through our screens, we toggle in Street View. We feel like we understand it, like we know it. Yet, do we really know what's outside our front door? Can we actually feel that intimate human connection? Can we understand that grit, that essence of the landscape that encompasses us? Places passionate about everyday experiences, taking great pride in crafting these moments of connection. As designers, we're stewards of the built environment, celebrating natural systems and designing active and healthy cities, working at every scale from gardens to infrastructure. With the dynamic material palette, we can transform a mundane place into something that is revered. How does a parking garage become one of the most sustainable buildings of a region? How does it become a beloved landmark of a Southeast neighborhood? It's a multimodal transit hub, but it's layered with native landscaping and stormwater systems, public art, educational opportunities, and passive recreation. In a rain event, it becomes a performance. The runoff goes through the steel channels, and it marks a moment of wonder, of gratitude.
We live in a city that is famous for some bold moves that were made in the 70s and in the 80s. Our community, designers, planners, public leaders, private leaders, they were more than just stewards of the city. They made the city what it is. What will we do today? What bold thinking can prepare us for the future as we're growing so quickly? How will we keep people connected to all the resources that they need? Food, jobs, their families, their social networks, the places they love. How will we be remembered? For preserving the status quo, what mark will we leave?
We believe in people and cultivating lasting relationships. The way in which we work is as important as the work that we produce. It's exciting because we never know where these relationships will lead us or what work will be next. One week, we may be working on corporate headquarters with a big budget. The next, we may be immersing ourselves in a community design process across the Pacific without a budget. We are open and we are ready for a challenge because we know that in the end, we're all in this together.
Experimenting, sharing what we learn. This is our philosophy at Place, and it's the philosophy of Portland. Always testing new methods, seeking innovation. In our case, that means building full-scale mock-ups of water features in our workshop. It also means asking big questions, staying connected to academia, teaching at local universities. It means hosting monthly salons in our studio, bringing in people from outside our team to discuss new philosophies. It means supporting the arts, hosting events and performances, designing stage sets, cultivating an environment where we are all respected and challenged to reach our full potential. These things feed us. They keep us actively engaged in our community, in our world, in each other. Taking risks to promote the things that we care most about, investing time and energy without knowing exactly what the results will be. This is who we are. This is Place. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wasn't that amazing? We are all working in these firms and have these amazing people in them that make what we do so much more interesting. Speaking of interesting, to bring it all home for us, John will share his experience in reviving Portland's oldest building. John's undergraduate degrees were in naval architecture, he's trained as a ship designer, and mechanical engineering. He followed with an MBA from Harvard. He chose to come back to Portland because he believed that our state land use planning would prevent the rampant sprawl of other American cities. After 10 years as general manager of Melvin Mark Properties, Russell formed his own firm and developed the 500,000 square foot Pac West Center, using Hugh Stubbins as the architect. Wall Street Journal named Pac West as one of the top 10 towers in America. He then purchased the 200 Market building, which he still owns. It's the first LEED building in America in the largest category, which is existing multi-tenant buildings. Russell has also an unusual hobby. In the past, he collected and restored mahogany speedboats from the glory days of the 1930s and 40s, winning him many awards. I'm sure he'd be pleased to answer any questions that you have after his talk about his boats as well as his buildings. Please help me welcome John.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I hope that my presentation will be informative. My wife and I have 3 kids, and Mary is fond of saying to each one of them, either individually or as a group, that each one is the favorite. And she means it, and I think they believe it. Having been owner or part owner of some 36 buildings in my career, I can honestly say that each one is my favorite. As the introduction said, I'm no stranger to new construction. I developed PacWest Center in the mid-'80s with Hugh Stubbins. Stubbins was not a household name, although his firm won the 4th National AIA Firm Award. IMPay was the 5th. But he had done Citicorp Center in New York, the slant-top building. And he and I shared a passion for buildings that had a vitality at street level. But at the time that I was developing PacWest Center, I was living as a bachelor in an 1859 3-story brick building, a national landmark building, the second oldest building in the city, redesigned by Greg Baldwin, who many of you may remember. And I loved that building, and I loved PacWest Center. And then Mary and I moved to a 1927 Wade Pipes house, and we still live there, and I love that building as well. But I, in a sense, met my match with an 1857 building. It's the oldest commercial building in the city. As I tell my friends in Seattle, it was built 32 years before Washington became a state. But in the 40s, and it was a cast iron front building. The iron was cast in San Francisco. But in the 1940s, somebody summarily took off the cast iron facade and replaced it with stucco and picture windows. Relatively easy to do, but the building was intact other than that very facade. But there were enough pictures, photographs of the building, that we knew precisely what the facade reconstructed would be to absolutely match the original. Now, as I'm a boat builder, I understand modern technology, epoxy, and so on. So the issue became, so how do you recreate these ornate castings of cast iron? The assumption that all of us made is that they would be some high-tech material, fiberglass, for example. Well, it turns out that fiberglass is dangerous in that if it gets chipped, the sun will deteriorate the fiberglass. So then we assumed that it would be cementitious material. It was fatally flawed because if it's damaged, it's very difficult to repair it. And after exploring all of the high-tech solutions, we concluded that the only way to do that building right was to actually recast the cast iron. This is a technology that's ancient. Through architectural reproductions, we found an actual foundry in Silverton built along the tracks. And it looks exactly like a West Virginia still with rusting roof over it with a tower next to it. And the video will show it. But the way you do that is you climb the top of the tower, you get to the top of this chimney, you toss in paper, kindling, firewood, exactly the way you build a fire in your fireplace. And then when it gets sufficiently hot, you toss in coal. And when that gets hot enough, you toss in coke. And when that gets hot enough, you toss in camshafts, engine blocks, anything that's cast. And then when that gets liquid, there's underneath that building, there's a crane, and you take this molten stuff around and you put it in molds exactly the way these pieces were cast in 1857 in San Francisco. So I thought this was so unusual that I wanted to record it, because I think it's, again, people just aren't familiar with this technology, although they should be. So when all that was done, I took a videographer down to Silverton, and what you're about to see is a video that describes the casting of these pieces. So if we could start the video. The historic name is Halleck and McMillan. Halleck was the city's first architect, and McMillan was his partner. It was originally a cast iron facade. The iron was cast in San Francisco and shipped up. It was a showpiece for Halleck, who was the distributor for the cast iron from San Francisco.
Halleck-McMillan building was the fashion at the time, the Greek Revival look. As a cast iron fronted building, it is the only one we have of the 1850s.
It's a significant building in its own way. It's a gorgeous little building. It's very modest. In contrast to its cast iron neighbor that I own, built in the 1880s. If you see the buildings side by side, you'll see the evolution of cast iron from the beginning of the Victorian age to the end of it. The chance to restore the oldest commercial building in the city that predated Oregon's statehood, it just has to be done, and has to be done right.
Doing it right meant putting together a team of craftsmen dedicated to restoring the Halleck and McMillan building to its original 1857 cast iron glory, using methods and materials common to the times. For preservation architect, author, and cast iron expert Bill Hawkins, the craft of recreating history starts with an eye for detail, a pencil, and a piece of paper.
This was the Halleck and McMillan ironwork. Taken off of photographs, blown up, and this is the detail that was on it. And then it becomes a piece of carving, a wood carving, in the round, full size. Then it is this piece, it's small enough that can go into the sand, the pattern is pressed in there, and the sand hardened around it, and it comes out iron.
We are looking at the two halves, top and bottom, of the pilaster patterns, and this is the two halves of the pattern itself, the face of the thing and the back of it, the cope and the drag.
At Architectural Castings, owner Dave Talbot shows John and the team from Emmerich Architects and Bremick Construction the sand moldings of the design elements that will eventually be cast in iron and adorn the facade of the restored building.
These leaves are pretty standard as far as this type of acanthus leaf, which people wouldn't recognize as one, but in fact it is.
Sculptor Steve Pancoast carved wood patterns for the pieces that will be cast.
This side of the shield actually sits flat on the surface. Now this side is more of an inset frame. If you see that lip right there, which is always great for a shadow, but this is emerging from underneath the protective perimeter.
Right.
So it's two different looks, and both of them are totally correct.
It is absolutely gorgeous, both halves, whatever. It's just spectacular. I'm thrilled with it. First time I've seen this, obviously. Technology has changed, and you would think that we'd be using fiberglass or reinforced concrete or combinations thereof, and figured out that the original technology of cast iron was in fact the best material of all. You don't have too many circumstances where something that was done in 1857 is still the best material, but it is.
The Silverton Foundry is believed to be one of the last of Oregon's coke-fired iron foundries. This is the place where the sand-cast molds of the Halleck and McMillan building's decorative elements will be transformed into cast iron masterpieces. The furnace is heated to 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Engine blocks and scrap iron are melted down, and the pour begins.
Clearly, OSHA has never been in this building.
The process can't be rushed, but the end result is well worth the wait.
In its final state, it will be a magnificent building on the inside with brick walls, beadboard ceiling, exactly the way it looked when it was new. And I've only recently come up with some sort of a metaphor to explain, at least to me, why we should care. And I've asked people, if you didn't know who your parents were, who your grandparents were, who your great-grandparents were, for better or for worse, your life would be different. You wouldn't have a grounding about what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And I think that's what historic districts do nationwide.
The fact that someone has adopted it and will love the building and do it properly is absolutely pivotal. And that has been the case with many of our landmark buildings in the city.
They're labors of love, really, not a way to make a living. All of the buildings that I've developed, whether I developed them new in the case of Pac West, redeveloped them in the case of 200 Market, or restored them in the case of my historic buildings, they're all potential landmark buildings. That's the contribution I hope to make to the city. So you'll not be surprised to hear that the Halleck and McMillan is my favorite building. Thank you.
Doesn't this get better every year? So please join us now for wine and talk and visit with our vendors who so graciously make it possible for us to come back every year. If you do want to get in touch with our 5x10 speakers, there's this line card that I think some of you received when you checked in, but I'm sure we have some more in the front. Their contact emails or addresses are down there, and you can get in touch with them if you can't grab them right now after this event. But other than that, enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you. One more quick announcement. We're glad to see you all back at 7:15 for our door prizes and then following our keynote speaker. Thank you. All right, we're going to announce the door prizes in about 2 minutes. So if you guys would all start working your way towards the front, that would be awesome. If you have a card like this and it has 10 signatures, you can actually win one of these 3 wonderful prizes. So please bring them back, bring them to the front here to Katana, and she will enter your name into the drawing board. All right. So for the drawing of the first prize, I would like to ask Angel Benavides to come up from Joseph Hughes Construction.
So at Joseph Hughes Construction, we do primarily tenant improvement, light industrial, multifamily, and assisted living facilities. So I guess now we get to the drawing. And this is for the echo. They didn't put their name on it.
So unfortunately, this person didn't put their name on it, so this is a chance to. So if you're really quick. Okay, then I have to pull out.
We'll have to do another one, okay?
Does this have a name or something?
No name. No, we do. Carrie Langford. All right. Carrie Langford.
Carrie Langford. Congratulations. Please, Dave Summers, come up to announce our second prize, which will be the toolkit. I was really interested in the toolkit, but I did not enter, so you guys have a chance.
Hi.
Hi, do you want to say something about it?
Okay, I'm Dave Summer, Intera Architectural Products, representing Envelope and some other manufacturers that are here, all building envelope materials and systems. And I'm excited to draw the next name. Are you guys excited to?
If there is a name.
Okay. Dave Summer. Oh, I'm sorry. Who's that?
Sharon?
Sharon? No. Sharon. I can't tell.
Sharon,
I can't tell.
I think it's Robbie.
Robbie? R-O-B-B-E, maybe?
Are you all sort of next to each other over there?
You get the award for penmanship, but you get a really cool tool set to go with it. Hey.
We will. Thank you. And I just want to say real quick that all three donors of the door prizes were very interested in our event. They wanted to participate, but most of the booths were already sold out, and so this was a way to sort of like integrate them as well. And thank you, all three, to be part of this. And so the third prize, Tim Sweeney, please announce the winner of the Beats.
How's everybody doing? Third and final, wireless headphones. Could I see some hands on who would appreciate winning this? Anyone? Anyone? All right. I'm Tim Sweeney. I'm with Chown Hardware. We're celebrating our 138th year in business this year. We do several stages of hardware. We do commercial, high security, hollow metal frames, and the portion that I'm involved with is the residential division. So without further ado, and I thank you for allowing us to be part of this. Oh my God, is this person a doctor?
Something Miller.
Is there a Katie Miller? Kylie Miller?
There's a phone number.
I'm not going to read the phone.
We have a phone number.
I think I heard it back here. Yep, here we go. So is it Keely? Kate. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be here.